have the great pleasure of introducing Kyle P. Madden, who is a partner in KLH Capital. I asked specifically for this. I've been on several webinars with Kyle, and after 27 years of knocks, scrapes, and bumps of doing this, every time I learn not just one, but generally 3 or 4 new things from him. Enough so that myself and a client's counsel who's here, we're going to pull him in on the case we're working for, even as we speak. That said, Kyle is a partner with KLH Capital, and he leads the firm's business development efforts. He is primarily responsible for identifying, structuring, and executing transactions, due diligence, and portfolio management. He serves on the board of directors for Bonita Marie International, Mid-State Machine and Fabricating, and Data Display Systems. Prior to joining the private equity group in 2009 as an associate, he was involved in a variety of brokerage-related capacities within the insurance industry. An active member of the industry, he has served on the board of directors of the M&A Source and was the 2013 chairman of the Alliance of Mergers and Acquisition Advisors. Everybody, give us a very big hand for Kyle Madden.
Thank you so much. Good morning, guys. Can everybody hear me? It sounds like there's a massively huge echo pointed right at me. But good morning. And my name's Kyle Madden. I'm a partner at KLH Capital. We are a lower middle market private equity shop based down in Tampa, Florida. We manage about $155 million in our most recent fund. And I'll chat with you guys a little bit more about KLH and what we do. But from 50,000 feet, we focus on the lower end of the lower middle market, right? We're exclusively working with family-owned and privately held businesses really all over the country, specifically for one reason, which is to facilitate their exit plan. We are, and I'll even go as large to say, lower middle market private equity exists to fill that void or that gap in valuation where your local community bank will lend X dollars, but you guys know that the company is worth more than that. So from 50,000 feet, that's why private equity exists conceptually, right? Is to provide the equity capital to bridge that gap in valuation to be able to facilitate the actual exit. Real open guy, so if you guys have questions, feel free just to cut me off and give a holler. We will quickly run through how private equity groups select investments, how private equity groups value these businesses, which is a fascinating thing right now. The market is very, very competitive. It's bizarre to think, but there's more dollars than there are companies to buy and partner with. So the supply and demand is totally off right now. How to identify various types of transactions. This is a big one for you guys. And KLH flies all over the country with EPI giving this presentation. One thing that we'll really hit on is point number 3 here, because there's a lot of different family dynamics and transition points that private equity can be a good tool for. There's a lot of them that private equity can't be a good tool for, but it's important for all of us that you guys understand where and when and how private equity can fit in, if that's of interest to you guys or the clients. And then lastly, again, I'm going to try and move fast through this stuff, but we'll walk through a number of case studies. Where is Mark? Will they get the slides, or can we send them the slides? Okay, all right, there's a lot of slides here, so we're not going to hit on them all, but I think you'll find this valuable to your clients. So the basics, I mentioned KLH Capital, based down in Tampa, Florida. I grew up in southern New Hampshire. Embarrassed to tell you that I followed a girl down to college in Tampa. I'm kind of a small town guy going into a big city, and on the weekends I'm trying to spend my time on a sailboat fishing or snow skiing. The basics on KLH, 30-year track record. Some of you guys may know our founding partners. They came out of Chemical Venture Partners back in the 80s, John Kirtley and Jeff Leck. So they ran Chemical Venture Partners mid-'80s and then started a group called Florida Capital Partners based down in Tampa in the late '80s, so we're still at it. We've partnered up with about 150 50 now or so families. But like I mentioned, everything that we do is a small business, what we define as a small business. Another one in the center here, everything that we do is a management-led transaction. And that's a really key piece and kind of part of our DNA is when we evaluate a business or an asset, the number one most important thing is the management team. And we talked about this in the presentation that just went on. Somebody over here mentioned that 9 out of 10 times the buyer will want that management team not only there, but with sophisticated horsepower to be able to run that company. What we do is we all gift them equity ownership day one. They don't have to buy it, they don't have to earn it, they don't have to do anything. We're coming out of our own pockets, right? So we're going to cash out the family, and if those folks continuing do not have ownership but should, we'll take it off the top from our proceeds and gift it to them in equity day one. And that's basically a way that we can do a deal in Arizona but be headquartered in Tampa and not run the company, right? So it's all about betting on these people. We're not the guys that'll do a deal if you need to look at the company, get rid of the CEO and swap him or her out. We're going to pass on that, right? So it's all family-owned, management-led transactions for the folks that are currently at that business. Private capital base. In sum, we've got about $320 million divided by 3 different funds. That money, about half of it is coming from the KLH founders and employees. The other half is coming from high net worth individuals. So we don't manage any sort of institutional capital. We can do big deals, small deals, A+ rated deals, C- rated deals, customer concentration, vendor concentration. I mean, all the things that we all run into in these smaller family-owned businesses. Again, we can kind of get there. Won't spend a ton of time here, but this slide focuses that management is really controlling these companies. Even if we own, say, 51 through 90%, they're really calling the shots every day. We don't get operationally active. So some deals that doesn't work for us, and some deals that's exactly what they're looking for. We can also do minority equity. I mentioned that we raised a fund of $155 million in August. That's the first fund that we're going to start doing deals where we can partner up with for probably 20% is the minimum, but 20% up through, call it 85% of the equity, or 90. Much more of the same. Prospective company sets the overall direction on the strategy, manages the day-to-day operations, hires and fires, identifies potential acquisitions. I always view it as the company is very good at running their playbook, their own playbook, customers, vendors, real estate, employees, et cetera. We are very good at running our own playbook, right? 2 totally different playbooks, right, at the same time. A third playbook is the actual exit strategy, right? And the goal here is to kind of marry the 3 of them so 1 + 1 + 1 can equal 4, 5, and 6. How many EPI members are in the crowd? Maybe not SEPAs, but just members. Okay, so similar numbers, maybe call it 10 or so. For those of you who are not, this will look probably new to you, but this is EPI's value acceleration process. So this is the, maybe not curriculum, but kind of methodology through their exit planning process to take a business owner. What we've found is private equity fits, depending upon the situation, of course, in all 3 of these different stages, right? And I've done deals at the very end where, he or she decides to sell. We've done deals that are really right in the middle where he or she decides, I want some money, but I don't really want to sell, so whatever that is, let's do it, which is a recapitalization. And we've also done deals where we were introduced to the company in the very early discover stage, right? Where step number 1 is the business owner saying, I need to start my exit plan by selling a piece. So let's do that now, right? And then fix up the car. So this is the vision from 50,000 feet, right? So you see time along the horizontal axis, equity value along the vertical axis. I always call it playing with the house's money. So companies started, next generation comes in, hires an exit planning consultant, business broker, advisor, attorney, et cetera. Company partners up with a private equity group. Our job, right, and what we define as success is when we can increase the equity value of that business over X amount of time. Could be 2 years, could be 10 years. Doesn't really matter the time frame. But that's the 50,000-foot goal with private equity, is to say, you guys have created this much value, right? And then how do you take your first proverbial chips off the table or first bite of the apple, play with the house's money, take additional risk, implement change, ERP systems, CRM systems, new sales guys, more sales guys, et cetera. And what spits out the other end is at some future date, a second liquidity event. And obviously, depending upon the situation, that second liquidity event is either going to the founding family or it's going to the management team that had been there when that founder stepped off and took the cash here for retirement, right? So that is all the equity value that the management team has created that we've gifted them in equity ownership. So let's dive in. This is pretty basic stuff, number one, so we'll fly through it. But the point here is to show you guys actually how a private equity group is constructed, right, physically. So the firm's charter plus the firm's partners equals the investment criteria. Pretty simple stuff. Limited partners at the top are your investors, pension funds, insurance companies, high net worth individuals, family offices, endowments, et cetera. That's your capital base or your pool of capital where you're drawing from. In the center is the actual fund or the general partnership. Now, one thing to note, I mentioned we've got a fund of $155 million. There's no bank account with $155 million sitting there, right? That doesn't exist. So we're calling capital on a pro rata basis as we do these deals. And then obviously you're parking that equity capital into your investments. When it comes to the private equity industry at large, there's been a handful of articles in the Wall Street Journal, probably more negative than positive, unfortunately. So you're kind of licking wounds from the political battles a couple years ago. But I think the point there that I'm trying to make is kind of Wall Street private equity, very, very different than Main Street lower middle market private equity. Totally different playbook. It's just very, very different. So the company maturity, there's private equity groups and really venture capital firms that will focus on startups. There's obviously the large guys in town here that'll do stable and mature. We view ourselves as more stable and mature. Operational involvement, there's groups that'll parachute into executives into an office in that company. There's groups that will literally stroke a check and never call back. Again, pros and cons to all these things. It's just what does the family want? Size of investments, groups with literally no money, groups with billions of dollars. I'm small fish with $155 million in the world of private equity, but that's kind of tailored to my audience or to the customer, which is the business owner and his or her family. And then I think the motivations of how private equity or how a fund makes its money is probably the most noteworthy piece on this entire slide. And also what you read about. You can make money by taking distributions, right? Kind of sweeping the profits out of the business at the end of the year, or you can reinvest, which is equity appreciation. Buy more trucks, hire more people, build the equity value of the company. We've found with these small family-owned businesses, it's a very awkward conversation when you're trying to distribute their profit at the end of the year to yourselves, right? That's a very weird dynamic. So back in the 80s when we first started, we said, all right, we're not going to make $1 taking cash out of these businesses. We're going to reinvest 100%. So what that means is day one, we're stroking a check, typically of a lot of money. We're not getting any money back whatsoever until X years down the road, God willing, when we sell successfully. And that story typically resonates with sellers. So this is our investment criteria. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. $2+ million of EBITDA. We do a lot of different family transaction types. Really 3 big industry verticals: distribution, service, and manufacturing. And we'll focus nationwide. Minority and majority equity. So how private equity groups value these businesses, this is kind of the fun part, right? So the day I started, and I'm dressed like this is the fanciest I'll be dressed all year, walked into the office like this, main senior partner comes down and says, kid, understand that you studied finance. Do you know how to multiply? Right, I'm doing what you guys are doing. I'm trying to think, all right, what is he actually trying to ask me? Because it's not if I can multiply. So I look at him and I said, yeah, Jeff, I'm pretty sure I can, but let me, let me know what you're getting at. And he says, well, good, because if you can solve for EBITDA and you can make up this thing called a multiple, you're good. Don't worry about the rest. He's kind of right. But really, I think when you talk to a lot of valuation firms, when you talk to business owners at large, how you get to valuation is always a myth. It's always a sophisticated process, or it's whatever the neighbor sold his or her business for, or whatever they sold it at the country club, or whatever Facebook's trading at, et cetera. But the real private equity methodology is very simple. You're taking your EBITDA, you're picking a multiple, and we'll dive through how and why to pick that multiple. That's your valuation. So from 50,000 feet, that's what we do every day. When it comes to evaluating what multiple to use, right, we're really dissecting these assets into three different legs of the stool. What's the company? What's the merits of the company? What's the deal? And then what is the management team? Right? And I think it's noteworthy to kind of harp on this, that you can have a really, really attractive company, but a bad deal. Right? You can have a really, really attractive deal, right? Attractive economics in the deal, but a bad company. Right? So we really dig into all three of these things and make sure that the pricing is relatively flat or consistent with the quality of the management team or company that you're getting. So we'll pick apart the company. These are my top 4 questions or items to answer and really ask you guys when you're calling in with these opportunities. So number 1 is, what is the business model? How do they make their money? Is it service? Is it distribution? Is it manufacturing? Right? Are you making wooden pieces of furniture? Are you making electronics? Are you making LED lights? Are you making, pieces of glass? Are you making suits? How do you make your money? And how is that sustainable? Or is it sustainable? If it's not, that's okay. That's just another conversation that we have to have. And where are the growth opportunities? This is where it gets fun and exciting for family-owned businesses, because typically the older generation has a vastly different answer than the younger generation, which is absolutely fine. So where are the growth opportunities, and what do you need to really satisfy that? More money, more people, or better technology? We've found that those 3 things are what lower middle market companies typically need. The problem or the lack of them exists because they cost money. And again, that's okay. Where are the risks and where are the weaknesses? Again, money, people, technology. So draw your attention to the top here. Business model: service, distribution, manufacturing. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we put this in here because this can help you guys almost create your own playbook with how to increase equity value for your clients prior to calling a private equity group. So on the left-hand side, the investment merits, that's what we are looking for right off the bat. The pillars of growth are things that we will look to provide to that company. We may not end up doing it, but we're ultimately going to have that chat. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Why? Why not? Etc. So again, we'll fly through, but give this guys to you for a playbook within service business models, distribution business models, manufacturing business models. Again, back to how we come up with that multiple. We will look at the company's customers, industry and end markets, suppliers or vendors, competitive landscape, management, and financials, right? All of that together puts together your investment risk. Again, from 50,000 feet, how does private equity come up with that multiple of value? What we are betting on is the stability of that cash flow, right? And think about that. We're asking ourselves, if you're making $4 million of EBITDA this year, or whatever it is, what's the likelihood that you will make at least $4 million next year? If it's a very high likelihood, then we will view that company as worth more money than if it's a low likelihood. Right? So project-based, selling big, expensive CapEx items where your revenue is pretty volatile, that company is typically not trading for a multiple that's highly recurring revenue, small dollar ticket items, et cetera. And you guys get the point. So, your multiple really is dependent upon the private equity group's risk. So here we've gone through back to these 5 segments, kind of put a menu together based on what we've seen that will dictate the beginnings of a multiple and a price, right? And right now is an interesting time in private equity because the price is 4 times EBITDA, 4 to 6, and 6 plus. I would almost take that and shift it this way, maybe another column, because I think on average, companies are selling for, I don't want to say more than what they're worth, but again, it's supply and demand, right? There's more money than there are companies to purchase, so folks are fighting over them, and it's a great time to be a seller. So we won't go through all these things, it's more for your help, but we've really dissected customers and what we look for there, industry and end markets, suppliers or vendors, competitors and the competition or the landscape there, management and financials. Again, this is where we spend a majority of our time, right? Because we feel that in lower middle market businesses, the financial house, we'll call it, is typically the weakest area of the company, which is totally fine, and we understand why, right? Again, because it costs money. But that's one of the areas that we first work on, really 2 reasons: to increase the equity value, and secondly, so that we have better data to make better decisions on what the future looks like. With management, absolutely the most important thing for us is the cultural fit. Can we do a deal with somebody? Can we work with somebody? Can we watch football on the weekends together? Can we drink a beer together? Can we hang out together? I mean, it's so much more than just numbers, finance, accounting, money, right? That's kind of back of the bus. What does the bench look like? Typically, the entrepreneur, and we'll actually hear about this in the next presentation, but is going to sleep envisioning a different business, a bigger business, a better business than he or she is walking into every day, right? And that's great because that's opportunity. So where are the gaps? What does the company need? How much does it cost? Is it hard to source, right? In this country, we have a significant lack of blue-collar labor. So I think a lot of industrial companies are finding it hard to source that labor. So a lot of companies are trying different things right now. What's the vision? Fascinating conversation when you have an older generation and a younger generation at the table, and just kind of picking through what the 2 visions are there. And the resources to get there. And then the last one, we talked about this over here a minute ago, is key non-owner managers, right? That is something that we ask, maybe not on the first date, but 3rd or 4th date, which is looking at the whole company. Who is working there that's currently a non-owner but should be? And every company always has key employees, key managers, C-level executives, sales guys, et cetera, that should be an owner. And we'll gift them equity. First and foremost, so they don't leave. Secondly, so they're making money the same way we are making money. And thirdly, that's an excellent opportunity for us to give them an opportunity to create really generational wealth. And that's motivating to people. How to identify various types of transactions. This is really kind of harping on what is the deal, right? And it's such an easy question to ask and answer, but that's so important in terms of what is the deal. Does business owner want to sell the company to his daughter or to his son, to his management team, or is it a situation where they're just looking to take money out of the company and they don't really want to do anything, just a liquidity event? What are their valuation expectations? What are the goals and objectives or the pain points? More of what the fundamental private equity options are in bullet form. This again in more of a visual. Horizontal axis, you're looking at operational control and more actually legal control. Your liquidity event is on the vertical axis. I think we've got maybe 5 minutes left, so I'm going to really speed up here. But the next handful of slides will dive into, going off of this chart, a lot of different case studies. What does an outright sale look like? Corporate divestiture, owner wants to retire, or a management buy-in. Management buy-in, different than a management buy-out. Buy-in is you find a company, but he or she wants to sell the company and retire, and there's no number 2 person in line. So you have to go out and source somebody and bring them in. Dives into what a management buy-in is conceptually. This was a case study of a Floridian business that is a sinkhole repair company. Fixes sinkholes. So it's a service-based business model. We got a call back in 2010, maybe, with a business owner who had come down sick, didn't know how much longer he was going to be with us for, was either going to shut the business down or sell the company, and didn't know how to do that at all. And he was making about $2.5 million of EBITDA, and we said, number 1, you're making a lot of money. Number 2, you've got 27 employees, so don't shut it down. So we quickly reacted, stroked him a check, partnered with him, bought the business, brought in a CEO that we happen to know in Tampa, Kathleen Shanahan. That company today is about $7.5 million of EBITDA. We've hired about 50 or so employees, mainly from the construction industry. So that's kind of a beginning case study there of a management buy-in. Corporate divestiture, I'm going to skip this one because I don't typically see this in family-owned businesses. I typically see this with larger-sized companies. Majority recap is where I would say lower middle market private equity spends a majority of its time. This is a deal where you would sell more than 50% of the company's equity. So what that deal looks like is either a management buyout, a family succession plan, or an owner-operator recap. Again, dissects majority recapitalizations, what that looks like. This is another company that happens to be in Florida. It's called Midstate Machining and Fabricating. They are going into mainly power generation facilities and mining processing plants, and they're doing all the turnaround work when those plants shut down for annual or semi-annual maintenance. This is an exit planning case study where the CEO was in a car wreck. And that was his light bulb going off, right? That was the catalyst behind why he wanted to facilitate an exit. Because nobody was injured in that car wreck, but he thought, what if? What if something had happened there? My wife and my 2 kids would not have gotten nearly the liquidity, nor do we have nearly the amount of liquidity than they probably think. All my eggs are in this mid-state basket. Help. Challenging part about this business is they've got a customer that's about 65% of revenue, albeit diversified amongst multiple different locations or facilities, but that's a risk to us, right? That was not as big of a risk to him, just because he eats, sleeps, and breathes it. So we got that deal done. Company, that was about $6 or so million of EBITDA. We've implemented new systems. We've hired new salesmen. We've brought on a president that he actually picked that came from our largest customer. EBITDA has nearly about doubled. It's almost a comical story at this point because Hal originally had said, I've got 3 years of gas left in the tank. That was about 5 years ago. His partner and president, Jeff, has completely re-energized him. And now that Hal has a bunch of money on the sidelines diversified away from this, he doesn't need to retire. He doesn't want to retire, right? So kind of your classic re-energized story there. How are we doing on time? Okay. Why don't we wrap it up there? We've got, and again, we'll email these, a couple different generational transfer deals, a management-led buyout, a minority equity deal. Back to this slide. Focus on the right-hand side. There is an option, right? Whether you want to keep the business or sell the business, you can do both. Quick Gantt chart of what a closing process typically looks like. This is 100% dependent upon really the veracity of numbers and the ability to produce those reporting capabilities. So sometimes Hal's business, Midstate, took us a year to close. Some businesses we can diligence and finance within 60 days. But that's kind of the high level of lower middle market private equity as it relates to exit planning. And we obviously wish we had more time, but we'll email you these slides and Happy to field questions now or via email or phone. Yes?
You have a slide talking about valuation.
Yeah.
Which is good, kind of make it simplistic instead of going through all these financial theories.
Yeah.
Basically, valuation derived from EBITDA times a multiple.
Yeah.
That's somewhat certain, the forecast, a little bit uncertain.
Yeah.
Multiple is a lot of subjective.
Absolutely.
In terms of maybe the range, not the good range, the highest and the lowest multiple that you've seen. I know you have multiple verticals.
Yeah.
Can you share your thoughts? What have you seen the lowest multiple you guys pay for a business and the highest multiple you guys pay?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the highest multiple that we have paid while I've been at the firm is about 13 times EBITDA, which was a stretch for us. That was in a wireless telecommunications company. It was more of a growth equity deal, but that was 13 times EBITDA. On the low end, we had partnered with a family who had a business that had about 80% contract concentration. I mean, literally 80% of its revenues coming from one government contract. So that business traded at a little bit over 2 times EBITDA because it was a non-recurring contract. So that's definitely an outlier, but I think an average there is kind of 6.5 times. Again, depending upon the growth, the vision, the visibility, and the future growth. Yes?
The average multiple right now is 11.5, just across all industries. Obviously, software is going to trade much higher.
Yeah. Yeah. The average EBITDA is something, I'm trying to think of an analogy. I mean, that's almost like saying the average home in America sells for $250,000. So it's tough to think of a business falling under your, quote, average EBITDA, right? Because the debt markets change per the size of company. Each company has its own risks, its own family dynamics, its own management dynamics. So when you, and this is a good point to bring up, when you read the industry reports, read the fine print and see what data is being put into those reports to tell you, my 13 times EBITDA, or whatever it may be. Yes?
How would you characterize the difference between private equity acquisition of a privately owned company versus a strategic acquirement?
Yeah.
Boil it down, distill it down to its most basic elements.
Most basic elements, probably competitive angle. I mean, 2 words. Most simplistic approach is just the competitive angle that a strategic would have over me. I don't know if I should say 100% of the time. I'd be curious what you think, Pam. I mean, I would say probably 99% of the time the strategic will be willing and able to pay more than I will if I'm looking at it as a platform. But a couple reasons. Obviously, they're looking at it as back office synergies, can consolidate a location, if that's their angle, right? They get the industry, they just know more about it. If I'm looking at it as a platform, I'm really only trying to buy, well, now with a minority equity piece, 20 to 80%, right? So right there in and of itself, the valuation's totally different. Secondly, I don't want to own 100%. So I'm looking at the management team saying, okay, how much money does the family need? And then who needs what in terms of equity value? That's a totally different thought process than the strategic saying, I know them, I want them, here's the check. So it's a totally different approach, but that's the big difference. And obviously, once we have the platform, right, then we can then put on our strategic hat and pay those types of multiples as well. Just, again, depends upon what the family wants to do.
Do you tend to over-equitize or do you put more debt on the company?
It's a really good question. Depends upon the balance sheet and what that business and kind of what the growth plan entails. On average, I'm kind of 60% debt, just so that I can model my own returns. Now that's its own conversation, right? Do the models ever come out accurate? The answer is no, never, literally never. And kind of pay attention to the way that I say this, but when the economy's good and strong and the debt markets are alive, there's a certain thesis that says, take the debt. Now, there's a huge difference between, quote, taking the debt and over-leveraging, right? But if you have a committed fund, and let's say it's a $20 million purchase price, I'm typically, $14 million, $13 million of debt. If I can get a little bit more, but also earmark the equity from the fund, we may not do that, but that's its own thesis right there, is take the debt while it's available. The key piece is if you have the equity to back that up if you need it. But we've seen a lot of groups do that. It's kind of put more leverage on it, but earmark the equity. I think we should wrap it up. Thank you so much, guys, and we'll get you these slides soon.